Fashion, everyday item, or high art? It's both. Support provided by the Glick Fund, a CICF fund focused on inspiring philanthropy. Additional support provided by the Crystal DeHaan Family Foundation in honor of the children and families of Crystal House. Though you could say fashion dates back to early civilizations like the Egyptians and Romans, the modern fashion house started in the 19th century. Charles Frederick Worth is known as the father of Haute Couture and the first designer to sew a label with his name into his designs. His House of Worth in Paris was also the first boutique to use live models to demonstrate the look of his designs. Couture items were custom made for the person wearing it and measured to fit. This made pieces very expensive and time-consuming to produce. The fashion house couture designs were reserved for high society and royalty. Back then, middle and lower class people only owned 2 or 3 outfits, and simple ones at that. As fashion changed, they would alter their existing wardrobe, adding details like collars and buttons to keep up to date. But as the Industrial Revolution ramped up, fabric became cheaper, labor became more mechanized, and by the 1900s, most people were wearing clothing off the rack, produced in different sizes. Yet fashion houses still exist today, including names like Chanel and Dior and Versace, and they usually create 2 lines: ready to wear for resale in stores, and couture for highly elite clients. Think the gowns you see at the Academy Awards. Many designers also make pieces that may never be worn by people at all, but instead demonstrate the designer's artistry and mastery at a certain technique. Japanese artist Issey Miyake became well known for a technique he perfected. Issey was born in Hiroshima, Japan, and survived the atomic bomb attacks as a child. Amazing. He later lived in Paris and then New York City before returning to Japan to found his own studio, the Miyake Design Studio. In the 1980s, he began to experiment with pleating fabric vertically with hundreds of tiny folds. This process had been used before, back in the early 1900s. Italian designer Murano Fortuny made a name for himself with the Delphos dress, a gown made of silk folded into hundreds of delicate pleats. But Miyake took the technique a step further and made dresses that looked almost like sculpture. He would use armatures or frames, creating simple to complex abstract designs with this delicate silk fabric. Yet his fabrics were so comfortable to wear that he also designed items for everyday use. Fun fact, guess who designed those signature black turtlenecks Apple founder Steve Jobs wore? Yep, that was Miyake. Chances are you might even be wearing something inspired by Miyake designs. Amazing how fashion design really can be practical sculpture or wearable piece of art. Over at the Cincinnati Art Museum, we go behind the scenes at the museum's textile department to look at a prized Miyake in their collection. Let's go check it out. We're here at the Cincinnati Art Museum to get a behind-the-scenes look. We are actually in the textile and fashion storage area, and we are here with Cynthia, and she is going to give us an amazing behind-the-scenes look at particularly this piece. Thank you so much, Cynthia, for your time.
Glad to be here.
Tell us, I mean, this is incredible just looking at this. What are we looking at?
This is a dress called the Minaret Dress by a Japanese designer. His name is Issey Miyake. He showed his first collection in Paris in the early 1970s and is still working today.
Really cool.
And his hallmark is really this pleating that we see in this piece. So this is actually called the Minaret Dress because it resembles a minaret, the tall, slender tower that has this kind of a shape. But he has created pieces that are very much related to origami. So another Japanese technique of paper folding. And he's created pieces that fold down into 2-dimensional shapes, but then when you open them up, they become a 3-dimensional dress on the body.
Oh yeah, so I mean, I assume that once this is taken off, I mean, it just literally is going to collapse into itself.
That's right, it just folds down flat in a big circle.
I don't know much, so how difficult would it be with the pleating process in itself?
Well, he pioneered this pleating with polyester fabric, so it's permanently pleated. And what he would actually do is create a garment that was oversized, so he would construct the garment and then put it into the pleater so that it would shrink down in size. So the garment was actually pleated after it was constructed.
Is this kind of more of him experimenting then as an artist, of figuring out what he could do with the pleat design?
Well, Miyake's interesting because he started out making garments out of very natural materials, so cotton and linen, and oversized, and then began to explore textile technology. So that's when he started doing pleating and crushing and folding of his textiles. He's very interested in the technology, so he's pushed the boundaries in terms of creating new kinds of textiles for his particular designs. He's always looking for new ways to change the textile so that it will be comfortable to wear and move easily on the body. And this is a little bit unusual for him. It's a little more sculptural than he usually does, but many of his pieces are made so that the wear is kind of part of the design, so that it becomes more sculptural when you put it on. And also it is able to be arranged on the body in different ways by each individual who wears the piece.
Well, one question I had for you, Cynthia, so how, knowing, with your work at the museum, how do we take care of this thing so that it sticks around for centuries?
Well, we're in our storage area, which is temperature humidity controlled, so that's a very important element in caring for all works of art, is to keep them very stable in terms of temperature humidity. We also keep these particular objects in the dark. So all textiles are light sensitive, which means not only will they fade, but light can actually make the fibers brittle. So when we're not up here, it's dark in here.
Thank you so much again, Cynthia, for your time and your extensive knowledge in fashion. I super appreciate it.
Great, sure.
I have to admit, I had no idea who that designer was, but I most certainly do now. How awesome to see someone inspired by the world around them and then convert that inspiration into fashion design. For this project, I'm going to try something completely new. I'm going to create, or better yet, redesign this suit jacket into a work of art, or at least that's my goal. Let me show you what I'm going to need for this project. First thing, I found this jacket and shirts at the thrift store. Yeah, tags are still on it. Next, I have some really good scissors, some pins to hold the fabric in place, white colored pencils for sketching on fabric, and a ruler. I also have a black fabric paint marker and a spray bottle of fabric paint. Lastly, I have some paper and tape, which I'm going to be creating a simple stencil out of. And of course, my idea printed out. All right, let's try this. Something I might highly suggest is finding some scissors that are meant for cutting fabric. It's going to make your job a whole lot easier. Here I'm using these pins to hold the fabric in place, since later on I'm going to try to sew this all together. Next, I'm using this paper to create my stencil. I'm really not sure what's going to happen here, but experimenting is definitely part of the fun. If you're going to use fabric spray paint like I am, you're definitely going to want to tape down your stencil. Something you'll notice is the fabric paint is going to absorb into the fabric, so you might have to layer your color. I'm going to stop there for now, but I've got some more work to do. I'm going to sew in these colors. I'm also going to keep going over my letters and add some highlights. This has been a really good challenge for me. I can't wait to see what you create. Until next time, stay outrageous, guys. Islamic art dates back to the 7th century and continues today. It's used both in holy places in the Middle East, such as a mosque, but has influenced designs used all over the world in architecture, fashion, and probably even in your kitchen. When used in religious spaces, Islamic art does not represent figures, as this is seen as idolatry, but instead uses shapes and calligraphy repeated in patterns over and over again. Did you know this form of writing is the third most widely used in the world? It's also written from right to left, something we are definitely not used to.